This conference will now be recorded.
This is the Metropolitan Water District presentation of our, we call this our caucus meeting. And this is a special meeting of West Basin Water Board directors. And it's April 7th, 2021 at 12:31. With that, I call the meeting to order. And it looks like we have a quorum. I see we have Director Mbr, and did I see Alvarez? Maybe we don't have a quorum.
No, we not quite yet. Director Alvarez is driving somewhere right now. Just hold on 1 second, please, President Williams.
How about Director Gray? Is she?
We have Director Houston on.
Okay, well then we can continue. So is there any public comment?
President Williams, good afternoon, and members of the public and staff that are on the call. No, we do not have any public comment.
Okay, well, today is a very special day for us because we have General Manager Jeff Keitlinger of Metropolitan online, and he's got his team with him, and it looks like we're going to have a great presentation today on a subject that's of interest of all of us, and that is the Carson Regional Recycling Water Plant. And we are looking forward to this because this is going to lead us to what do we call it? Raw water augmentation in the future. Is that right?
Yeah, President Williams, Jeff is going to talk about a few other things before we get to the presentation, but yeah, that will be the main feature.
That's the main thing. That's what we want to hear about. So please, I will turn things over to you, Mr. General Manager, and you have control of the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, I think Jeffy's talking about the most important general manager on the call. He's talking to you, so take it away.
No, this is your home turf, Patrick. I was deferring to you. So thank you, President Williams, and thank you, West Basin. I'm just going to update a few things here. We got our staff, Joyce Lehman and George DiGiovanni of our water quality team, and they're going to do a very interesting presentation. And I know as a engineering background, President Williams, you're going to be fascinated by it. It's a very good presentation on this very innovative research we're doing at the Regional Recycled Water Facility project that we're going to be doing. I'm going to ask Devin Upadhyay to introduce them and to set the table for that, because I see Devin's on here, so he can do that. And then also, I think, I see you have a legislative update like you usually do with EJ. And so D. Zink can also talk about what we're doing with a Stern bill. Senator Henry Stern has a bill regarding Metropolitan. We want to talk to you about that when we come to that on the agenda. But I'll just give you a quick update on water supply conditions and some of the Met agenda items dealing with that before we switch over and before I turn it over to Devin to introduce the Regional Recycled project. Water supply conditions, as you're aware, extremely dry, and we just got our state water project allocation lowered. And as most of you are aware, the state water project allocation forecast that's prepared by California Department of Water Resources is very conservative, and they do it on what's called a 90% exceedance, which means 90% of the time you would expect your allocation to go up from where they set it, based on upcoming storms and precipitation, and 10% of the time it would either stay flat or go down. Well, we're in that 10% of the time. They started us at a 10% allocation, so it always starts out at a small number, and then works its way up. And they just recently announced that we're actually going from 10% to a 5% allocation. So what that means is the state water project calculation is roughly based on 2 million acre feet I'm sorry, on 4 million acre feet with, so if you, and Metropolitan roughly gets about half the water. So in a 100% allocation, Metropolitan would have available to it 2 million acre feet of water. In a 50% allocation, 1 million acre feet of water. Well, when you're at a 10% allocation we started with, that was 200,000 acre feet of water. And now we just got shaved to a 5% allocation, that's 100,000 acre feet of water. That is less than 1 month deliveries for Metropolitan. We generally deliver 120 to 180,000 acre feet, depending on the month, in that range. And so 100,000 acre feet is about 3 weeks or so of deliveries for Metropolitan. So that's an extremely low amount from the State Water Project. We issued a press release on that because obviously reporters were asking, what's the reaction to it? You know, the good on the, you know, obviously it's bad news on the State Water Project front. The good news is we're well prepared. We have more water in reserves than we've ever had in our history. We have basically about 4 million acre feet, a little bit over that in our total reserves, about 700,000 acre feet set aside for emergencies. So that gives us 3.4 million acre feet or so to work with in drought conditions. So plenty of actual water supply available to us. There's still going to be operational challenges. We have what we call, excuse me, parts of our area that are exclusive areas, meaning those areas can only receive state project water. And so we'll be guarding our state project supplies very carefully and heavily flexing our Colorado River supplies and our reserves for the bulk of our service area, and really husbanding the state water project water for use in those exclusive areas. And so one of the actions we're doing is, of course, is, you know, a lot of it's operational, how we move water around, how we get it out of our reservoirs, how we meet demands going through it. Among the actions we've done is we're ramping up our pumping on the Colorado River Aqueduct. We're going to be moving to an 8-pump flow, which is a maximum capacity take on our Colorado River Aqueduct. And it'll be the first time we've done that in the last 5-6 years, since 2015. Normally, you know, we haven't needed to take that much from the Colorado River, and we've been banking water in Lake Mead for these kind of drought years. So we'll be ratcheting up to a maximum take on our Colorado River, and people will be getting a blend of water that's heavily based on Colorado River water. We'll be doing some other operational issues to push Colorado River water into the exclusive areas around our Mills treatment plant in Riverside, and also using our Gregg Avenue pump station to push water up into Colorado River water up into parts of northwest of our service area, up into the LA City area that normally only receives state project water out of our Jensen treatment plant. And so we'll be taking a number of those actions. And then finally, we'll take a hard look at, is there transfer water available to us at a reasonable price? The transfer market, water transfer market in California has been severely constrained, I'd say, since probably the last 15 years, maybe almost 20 years. And there's two dynamics that have really constrained water transfers in California. One is south of the Delta, there's been a heavy shift over the last 20 years from row crops to permanent crops. Meaning, you know, California at one point in the mid 1990s had 1.5 million acres of cotton south of the Delta. There's now about 150,000 acres of total in the total state of cotton being grown. All that land that was taken out of cotton production and other types of similar types of low value crops were shifted into things like wine grapes, pistachios, almonds. Those were multi-million-dollar investments by farmers. And the main thing is they have to have water every year. They can't be turned off. Otherwise the trees die. So those farmers, they used to sell us water during droughts in the 1990s. Not only are they no longer selling water to us, they're in the market buying water to keep their trees alive. And so that has really constrained any transfers south of the Delta. And then, so that means the only transfer water really available out there are rice farmer water and a couple other small types of water. And most of that's north of the Delta. And once the restrictions came in on moving water across the Delta, in the mid 2000s from the biological opinions and the various court decisions from Judge Wanger. The transfer window and the ability to move water across the delta is so narrow that you can just barely do it. So we're going to take a look at transfers. We're going to be bringing to the board a board letter at the April meeting to authorize myself to go out and buy some of this water. It's looking to be in the $600 some an acre foot range. And if it goes up much higher than that, we may not pull the trigger. But even if there is going to be some water available, we'll probably ask for the ability to buy up to 100,000 acre feet. But my staff is telling me we don't expect to see more than 10 to 30,000 acre feet total being made available, just because the conditions are so hard to press to make transfers. So we're going to ask for some discretion and some ability to spend some money, but frankly, we don't see much of that happening, probably just very little. So that's an update on the water supply conditions. Good news is, even if we get no transfers or anything, we're still in good shape for 2021. And we'll just see how we manage through 2022 if it remains dry. But we have good water in reserve. We have the ability to service all the exclusive areas. And if some transfers become available, we'll probably step in on a limited role and pick up some of that water, but it'll be fairly limited. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Devin to introduce the team to bring you up to speed on our regional recycle project, the timeline, and some of that recent innovative work that's being done. So Devin, can you take that away?
Before we go there, Jeff, could we see if there's any questions out there? Last chance. Okay, Jeff, back to you.
Okay, Devin.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, President Williams. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all today about this project. The Regional Recycle Water Program, remember a number of years ago, we had started the process to develop the Advanced Water Purification Facility as a demonstration plant, really, with our partners, LA County Sanitation District. And the idea was to both be able to create the path to get permits for the program and to be able to prove out the treatment processes, but also to kind of push the envelope a little bit with respect to some of the research out there to show what kind of credit a facility like this should get for implementing an MBR in the treatment train in a rather innovative way. And we've talked a lot over the course of the last year and a half about what the future for this program might look like, but we haven't talked much about the great research that's going on using this facility. So it's a great opportunity to share some of that information with you today. And President Williams, I appreciate your comments at the front end. This is an exciting project, and it's actually being presented today by two folks. It's going to be a tag team presentation. So Joyce Lehman is going to start off the presentation, and for those of you that before COVID hit, before these restrictions hit, we're able to make it down to the facility. You've probably met Joyce, or at least seen her down there. She's a principal engineer. She's housed at the facility. She's working day to day on the purification center, and she's going to talk a little bit on the first half of the presentation about what we're doing. And then George DiGiovanni is our team manager over microbiology, and he's going to talk in the latter half of the presentation about some of the research that's being done. But just a great opportunity to share with you. I thank you for this today. And it looks like you've already got the slides up. So Joyce, I'm going to hand it over to you. Please take it away.
Thank you, Devin, for that intro, and good afternoon, everyone. We're really excited today to share with you about the research that we've been conducting at the Advanced Purification Center in Carson. So as Devin mentioned, we're going to try to go through these slides relatively quickly today, since we will be going over them also on Monday at the E&O meeting. So our presentation will review 5 major areas as shown below. We'll kind of start with a broad overview and make sure everyone's got their context of our facility, and then we'll go into some of the research results and follow that with next steps. So this is our demonstration facility, which is located at the Los Angeles County Sanitation District's Joint Water Pollution Control Plant in Carson. And currently the facility takes non-nitrified secondary effluent as the feed water, and then it treats it through three major processes shown of MBR, RO, or reverse osmosis, and UV AOP. And our demonstration project has kind of like three prongs or major overarching objectives. And priority one, the main goal currently that we're looking at is how do we obtain regulatory acceptance of a treatment train for a future potential full-scale facility? And in particular, how do we demonstrate the pathogen removal through MBR? So that's the first kind of major goal. A second objective is establishing relationships through our coordination and collaboration with our project partners, the Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts, and they've been an excellent partner throughout testing. And we also want to interface with the public and continue to reach out now through virtual tours, previously with on-site tours. And lastly, our future plans will continue to work towards refinement and development of a full-scale AWT facility. So I'm going to define some terminology here. As I noted previously, so the feed water into the demonstration facility is secondary effluent. So currently the MBR is a third process or a tertiary MBR. And in a future phase, we envision the demonstration facility feed water will be primary effluent, so the MBR would be a second process or a secondary MBR. And so currently we're in the last segment of tertiary MBR testing, and our goal is to optimize treatment. And so this leads to why we would want to pursue evaluation of secondary MBR as a next step, as another potential option. So we've completed nearly 1.5 years of extensive monitoring, and preliminary results show that the overall treatment train meets all groundwater recharge regulations for chemical constituents. And we're continuing to confirm our results with refined operating conditions and ongoing testing. So here are the three major processes at the demo facility. And I've circled MBR because MBR is really what's unique about our project. And the Membrane Bioreactor, MBR, really contains two subcomponents. The first major component is the biological reactor, and that's where the microorganisms are thriving. They're removing ammonia and other biodegradable compounds. And then the second component is the membrane itself, where the small particles get removed, and the filtrate or the product water from the MBR is a very high quality, low turbidity water. We have the other two processes, but focusing on the MBR system, you may be familiar with other advanced water treatment facilities locally throughout California, where instead of an MBR system, these facilities typically will have an MF or membrane filtration, where that feed water doesn't have a biological process, but that feed water goes directly to the membrane. But we're seeking to leverage the benefits of the biological process and those microorganisms that do a lot of good work. Really, we're building on prior pilot studies that showed a lot of significant advantages that could be realized with an MBR system when we looked at parallel treatment trains comparing an MBR versus an MF. But so why aren't MBRs used more? It's because there's no credit on a regulatory perspective that's given to membrane bioreactors from a pathogen removal perspective. And that's a key component of the groundwater recharge regulations. So there's no permitted MBR facility currently in California. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of research that's been done that shows there is a lot of pathogen removal through the MBR systems. It's just the framework isn't there to give the regulatory credit. So that's what we're doing at the demonstration facility. It's kind of the heart of what we're doing in this first phase of our testing, is to look at what is that removal through the MBR. And we're doing it by literally counting pathogens in the feed and in the filtrate of the MBR. And then that difference in the concentration between the feed and the filtrate is the removal. And so you can say it in different ways. You can say it's a 90% removal, or you can say it as a log removal value. And you see this term thrown around a lot of LRV. So it's just another way to say that we're getting a high degree of pathogen removal through the MBR. And so our project is seeking a minimum of 2.5 LRV, or 99.7% removal of those pathogens through the MBR. And so George will talk a little bit more about how we're doing that in the lab.
Great. Thanks, Joyce. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly. All right, very good. For some reason, my other microphone's not working today. So good. Carrying on here, as Joyce mentioned, we're looking at reduction of pathogens, in particular Cryptosporidium and Giardia. Those are two parasites that can be found in wastewater. And we're looking at very large volumes of MBR filtrate water. So we're collecting up to 10,000 liters or so of MBR filtrate using a specialized filter for Crypto and Giardia. The samples come back to the lab, go through an extensive purification process, and eventually we count the Crypto and Giardia by microscopy. To give you an idea of how much 10,000 liters is, that's equivalent to the water in about 50 hot water heater tanks. Thanks. Next. There were no off-the-shelf methods, so we had to do quite a bit of method modification, and especially to adapt to the larger sample volumes that we're using in this study. And so we worked on the method modification to improve recovery of the Crypto and Giardia from the samples. And unlike most reuse studies previously done in the industry, we're incorporating an internal control so that we can measure the recovery of Cryptosporidium and Giardia for each sample. And that's really important and a unique aspect of this project. Overall, this is leading to higher method sensitivity, better quality control, and better data integrity. Next, please. The method modifications, just to give you an idea of what that looks like, they were really focused on removal of interfering debris, particles that come through with the concentrated large volume samples. And we really focused on removing those because they interfere with the microscopy counting of the organisms. In previous reuse projects, the recoveries of Crypto and Giardia were around 10% or less. It was not uncommon to have 0% recovery of spike material. Here we're looking at, with our improvements, about 45 to 55% recoveries in some of the assessments we've done. Thank you. Next. Along came COVID, a nice pandemic to deal with. And it's well documented that the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the virus that causes COVID-19 disease, is found in wastewater, okay? And it's also important to note that even though it's found in wastewater, no studies to date in the scientific literature have demonstrated infectious SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater. So despite that, though, we wanted to have, out of an overabundance of caution, some type of treatment for the samples that would inactivate that virus, kill that virus off, so that it would be safer to work with in the laboratory. And through collaborative work with our Los Angeles County Sanitation District folks, we developed a novel SARS-CoV-2 virus inactivation method that uses cholate, which is a compound found in bile made by the liver that will inactivate the organism. Now, we have not been working directly with SARS-CoV-2. We work with a surrogate beta coronavirus. It's a human beta coronavirus that causes a mild common cold, okay? Just so you're aware of that. We do have ongoing work with the California Department of Health Virology Lab. They are looking at this cholate inactivation using SARS-CoV-2 virus in their laboratory for us right now. So very exciting work. Although I'm focusing on Cryptosporidium and Giardia analysis, we're also doing virus analysis in the laboratory. And here are just a few images for you. So other than SARS-CoV-2, we're measuring other human viruses that can be found in wastewater. And you see the team members all geared up for biosafety there. That's a good example of that. Next, please. Although we're measuring Crypto and Giardia directly, we're also looking at potential surrogates or substitutes that can be correlated with the Crypto and Giardia concentrations and removal, and that might be a little bit easier to measure. So that's something else we're doing. Next, please. Importantly, under baseline MBR conditions, we did find very good removal of Cryptosporidium and Giardia. So calculating those log reduction values, or LRVs, for crypto 4.4, for Giardia 5.8. And we're also analyzing the data right now to see if there is a correlation between the crypto and Giardia removal and some other surrogates, such as E. coli measurements or turbidity for the water. Next, please. Overall, the project is generating very high quality pathogen and indicator organism data sets. And of course, one of the main objectives of the project was to look at baseline MBR performance. And we're seeing very good removal of crypto and Giardia, much higher than the minimum 2.5 LRV needed for regulatory compliance. Next. We have industry outreach and collaboration that being showcased as well. We recently participated in a special session for the 2021 Water Reuse Symposium with our LA County Sanitation District's partners. And we have an upcoming webinar next week as well with AWWA. And we're continuing in that area, including some publications, and we have more forthcoming. Next. We're also assessing performance of the MBR system under damaged conditions to take a look at how robust and integrity. We're currently in the last of 3 challenge test conditions, just starting up with that, to assess pathogen removal through intentionally cut membranes. So we cut the membranes, and we look at how many crypto and Giardia are coming through the system. And of course, we expect to see lower removal and reduction in log removal values, or those LRVs as well under those conditions. Next. We have tertiary MBR testing, and that's anticipated to be completed in the 2021. So the current tertiary MBR test later this year should be complete. We have secondary MBR testing scheduled for late in this year, and RFPs will be issued and should be coming to the board for approval later on this year. We have ongoing coordination with our LACSD partners, regulators, and our Independent Science Advisory Panel, or ISAP, and we continue to share our research and testing results through various forums and publications. That wraps it up. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, thank you. Are there any questions out there?
Director Williams, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Patrick, and you can handle the questions as they come in.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, great presentation, Dr. DiGiovanni and Joyce. I do have a question really probably for Jeff, just on this project as a whole. Jeff, maybe you can give us a high level. What is the schedule, assuming it's approved by the board down the road, but in terms of EIR through design and into construction, and an approximate costs or estimated costs? I know it's a long ways out, but if you could answer those questions, I'd appreciate that. And I have a follow-up question after that.
Sure, Patrick. So broad strokes, we're, the typical environmental California EIR process, 18 to 24 months. We got board authority to do that. Because this project may very well or will likely be built in phasing, what it'll probably be is a programmatic environmental review, and then we'll have project specifics for each phase. So I would say all in all, the environmental review process should be about, give or take, about 3 years before we're coming back to the board for final decision making to go. So that puts you in the 2024 timeframe, and complete design and construction and build out about 8 years. So that puts you in the early 2032-ish timeframe. And that's your broad strokes. Obviously, the schedules change and decisions change. Then in terms of cost, obviously until we get through the environmental review, we won't have hard numbers, but the broad numbers are, the projected numbers are, we could probably produce water in the mid $1,800 an acre foot is what we're looking at. So that's more expensive, obviously, than met treated water at $1,000, and if this water is going into groundwater basins, you know, competing with our current water at roughly $700 an acre foot. But that's to be expected. Any project of this size is going to be more expensive than Metropolitan's imported water by around that sort of range, if not more. And that is to be expected for recycled water. And we would expect to see those same kind of numbers at most large-scale recycled water projects, that roughly being about somewhere between 50% or a little higher more than a Metropolitan's imported water costs. And so that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at, how to best finance that and how to, you know, mitigate those impacts to ratepayers. Is there going to be federal funding available through grants, Title 16, and other water bonds to help push down that price? So we'll continue to work on that, and we expect the other folks in the imported water, looking at imported water at Hyperion and City of San Diego's Pure Water at those large-scale projects. Their numbers will likely be in the same range at 50 to 75% more than imported water. And obviously they'll be looking at how to finance that and manage that for their ratepayers. I don't know if Devin, if you have any thing to add to that.
Yeah, Jeff, just a couple things. You know, you talked a little bit about the city of Los Angeles and the city of San Diego, and the interesting thing with their projects is as city entities, you have wastewater and you have potable water supply provider that are under the same house in a city. That's not the case with this particular project, where we're the water provider, but our partner is a major wastewater provider and treatment operator. So you would expect there to be a division of duties as we carry out the full-scale project, and some costs will fall on our side and other costs will fall on our project partner side. The $1,800 estimate that Jeff shared doesn't assume any split of those costs. It's just the raw, you know, cost per acre foot, if you will, without assuming any split there. So that's one thing I wanted to share. The other thing goes back to President Williams' comment at the front end about raw water augmentation. And in the slides that you saw, we showed that that is the long-term vision with this program, is raw water augmentation at our treatment plants. So water going into the headworks of one or more of our treatment facilities. And the initial testing in the demonstration plant that we've done right now is really looking at meeting the criteria as defined under groundwater augmentation regulations. Now, the state just recently issued some guidance on where they think the framework will be for potable reuse and raw water augmentation. And I'm sure you guys, along with many others, we're all looking at that framework. One of the things that we plan is, as we get a better sense of what that framework will require of folks to do for raw water augmentation, that we'll be able to use this demonstration facility and add to it to look at what additional treatment might be needed, and to be able to do that analysis there at the demonstration facility. So aside from the environmental work that Jeff outlined will be playing out probably through early 2024, we'll be having a discussion with the board about whether, you know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years from now, whether we want to make some adjustments to the demonstration facility to take a look at additional work that would help comply under a raw water augmentation framework. So that's just another step and piece of the puzzle that will fall into place in the next couple of years.
Quick question, Devin, in your opinion, how far off do you think we are from that, from where we're at raw water augmentation? Because a lot of people think that because we've heard over the years, like when I first came on the water board back in 2015, it was that at that time there was a study done by the University of Colorado that said that there's a 50% chance that the reservoirs of the Colorado River will be dry by 2050. So it looks like we're up against a time frame here. So what do you think?
Yeah, President Williams, there are a number of drivers why this project, the program that we're pursuing and the discussions we're having with you and the board are really timely. But to the specific question that you've got about raw water augmentation and will it happen, my first response is that we are very supportive of the state board developing this framework and doing it by the deadline that they have legislatively in front of them. They're working towards that, and that's just here in the next couple of years. I think it's going to happen. I think we're going to get that framework. I also think that the initial pieces we're seeing from the state board is that they're being very conservative in what they're putting out as that framework. They're attacking it saying, you know, we really need a lot of treatment requirements in order to be able to allow raw water augmentation to move forward. And we need to take a close look at everything that is really needed to be sufficiently protective. With that said, kind of the sidebar discussion that I would give you is your comment about the Colorado River. We're already doing raw water augmentation. There's a fair amount of wastewater that's already coming into the main stem of the Colorado River, and we're receiving it through our supplies, and obviously that's moving through our treatment plants. But to meet the state's goals, President Williams, raw water augmentation has to be part of that. The state has very aggressive water reuse goals for the future, and I don't think that we get to those goals as a state without that framework being adopted.
Very good. Well, thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah, President Williams, I have a question. Thank you for that. Great answers, Devin and Jeff. But this is one for Jeff if he's still on the call. It's kind of unrelated, but to this topic. But I did have some inquiries about the Met inspection trips, when we might likely see the metropolitan inspection trips come back into play.
So good question, Patrick. And I know we're all eager to get back to normal as fast as possible, whatever normal is going to look like in the future. Good news in California. Clearly, the governor just recently announced that expects complete resumption of business activity by mid-June, absent any other breakouts. We have planned. We always plan to take the summer off in any event, so we're not going to start our inspection trips up in the spring, and so we will not be having anything brought forward until the earliest would be fall of this year. But as a practical matter, we're focusing most of our attention and thinking about getting the inspection trips online in early 22. And if there's an opportunity at the end of this year, we'll take a look at it. But things seem to be in a state of flux, and we're obviously taking our guidelines from the state of California as well as the Center for Disease Control on how to manage that. But we're also being a little extra cautious. You may or may not recall that even before there was a state shutdown, we shut down our inspection trips.
Right.
When we were still just getting news of a growing pandemic coming out of China and hadn't really reached the US yet, we started taking actions to shut down our inspection trips. And the reason we do that is we have our 5 pumping plants across the desert. They're pretty isolated. The crews there are pretty isolated. The good news is by that isolation, they're by nature socially distanced from folks. The bad news is if they, if they had an illness sweep through it, we don't have replacement crews ready to go to the desert. So we wanted to keep them isolated, secure, and away from folks. And the nature of an inspection trips is we're bussing in 100 people at a time. And so I think we're going to be a little cautious in reopening the desert to those inspection trips. Earliest would be fall of this year, but I think more realistically, probably spring of 22.
It makes sense.
Thank you very much. That makes sense. I don't know if there were any other questions. If if not, I guess we can move on to our next item on the agenda, item 3B, the legislative update by the incomparable Manager of Water Policy and Resources Development for West Basin, E.J. Caldwell.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Patrick. And I'll run through a couple of items, and then I do see that Dee's Inc. is on, so I might throw a couple over in her direction because I know that Metropolitan Water District has a very active legislative portfolio this year. Let me first begin with the Senate actions related to an early budget plan. Senate Pro Tem Atkins has provided her general outline for a drought, safe drinking water, and water supply reliability budget plan. That does include swiftly spending approximately $2 billion in one-time use of state and federal funds. This is primarily focused on utilizing those federal American Rescue Plan dollars, as well as the acceleration of general obligation bonds that were passed through Proposition 1 and 68. Of note for communities like the West Basin Municipal Water District service area, does provide funding for immediate community assistance for water drought relief. That includes roughly $500 million for rebates to move more towards drought-proof landscaping. There's also $300 million to assist communities and water districts to meet state requirements in terms of groundwater reliability and sustainability. And then there's also hope to spend some money on our California surface storage plan, specifically Temperance Flat. So while we don't have, or I personally don't have, the specific outline of all of the funds available through this program, we are anticipating that language will be available in the near future. So we'll continue to track that, but obviously this will be part of the larger budget play in the Assembly as well as the California State Senate. I know that our previous speakers have mentioned it at certain points, but COVID is still obviously impacting the state of California and locally in LA County and West Basin service area. But just earlier this week, Governor Newsom did announce his intent to move California into an open state as of June 15th. That is contingent on several different aspects, one of which would be that the vaccine be available to all those 16 and older. Secondly, it would have to maintain California's decrease in hospitalizations. So not only seeing that continue to decrease, but also maintaining that low number. At that point, obviously, the economy would be considered to be open. However, there would still be some restrictions when it relates to potentially masks and other safe distancing programs. I think we've talked a little bit about some of these bills, but I thought it'd be worthwhile mentioning. We're now in that crucial period of not only have bills gone through that initial introductory stage, but we're beginning the process of committee and policy hearings. And as part of that, we're starting to see a number of bills be amended. And I wanted to touch base on a couple of those here today. First and foremost is Assembly Bill 1195. This is an Assembly bill by Assemblywoman Garcia, was specifically related to the West Basin and Central Basin service area that overlies the Water Replenishment District. And I wanted to highlight this because originally I think we all saw the bill and had a lot of questions. The bill was specifically to create the Southern Los Angeles County Regional Water Agency. And the amendments I want to point out have really used the term scrapped, but have moved on from that original concept. The bill now utilizes what's called the Southern Los Angeles County Human Rights to Water Collaboration Act. Through that act, the State Water Resources Control Board would appoint a commissioner to oversee several actions within that region. And specifically, I want to highlight this because this is one area where I think that the bill becomes a little bit more specific than the original draft. That commissioner has pretty broad and vague authority to kind of take over and assist when needed, failing at risk or potentially at risk community water systems. They shall review the assessments and evaluations that the Water Replenishment District shall be conducting, and I believe that those are voluntary as of now. So WRD would conduct those voluntary assessments, but the commissioner would assist in that sense. They would identify projects, processes, and systems that may assist public water systems that consistently fail or at risk of doing so. They shall plan for the consolidation of public water systems that either consistently fail or at risk of doing so, including identifying and receiving water system operators without regard to jurisdictional boundaries. So I think that if you read that UCLA study, that was one of the points that that study made, was that sometimes it's hard to find a receiving agency based off of jurisdiction. And I think one thing that will catch most people's eye is that the bill would require the commissioner to oversee the operations of the Central Basin Municipal Water District in selling drinking water and recycled water to public water systems in its jurisdiction. The Central Basin Municipal Water District shall cooperate with the commissioner in exercising the commissioner's oversight responsibilities, and the commissioner may require the Central Basin Municipal Water District to pay for an audit directed by the commissioner. And I think that for those stakeholders that have been working on this bill, working with the author, working with the Speaker's office, I think that the underlying intent of the bill and the amendments that have been made are more kind of geared towards affecting that or impacting the intent. But I think that a lot of stakeholders will probably share some concerns about the new language. The bill has been double referred to local government as well as environmental safety and toxic materials. However, no committee hearing has been set yet. So for those that are working this bill, and I know Metropolitan Water District had some concerns with the original language, I think that there'll be several people working on the bill now that we have those amendments.
Hey, EJ, this is Alex Rojas. Do you mind if I jump in really quick on this?
Of course, of course.
Yeah, so we drafted an opposed letter. We sent that out to our legislative advocates, and we're sharing it with all of our member agencies and customers, only because there's another part of the bill in which the language says that any water that's been extracted from the ground, any water rights or once extracted can never be purchased or transferred or sold to a non-public agency. So the IOUs are definitely against this. They shared with me that according to their legal review, it's that language in itself is unconstitutional. So they have issues with it. So Central Basin took an opposed view, a letter. I'll share that with the group. I'll share it with Patrick and whoever, and Jeff and whoever is interested. But our customers, so the small mutuals, the Maywoods, the Tract 180s, they oppose this. They asked us, they shared with us concerns. The IOUs have concerns, and then the cities don't like it. So we kind of are opposing it as Central Basin, but also because in response to a request by our own customers that it is very broad. It appoints this kind of commissioner, and then there's a to be determined board by to be determined entities that are going to be clarified later. But to be very frank with the group, the idea of this slow drip of waiting for additional amendments and clarification, I think it's a little bit exhausting on some of our member agencies who are very concerned about this setting a really bad precedent. So we drafted a letter of opposition. It went out. I'll share it with whoever might be interested. But for those reasons, that's why we took the position we did.
No, thank you for that insight. And I think you're right in the sense that you read through it, and especially with the advisory panel, it does not identify who those people would be, the number of them, or the appointing authorities. It's pretty broad. And some of the language is quite vague, which again pops off the page. But if you want to share your letter, obviously, we can make sure that the group gets that as well.
Thank you.
Moving forward, I do want to highlight that Senate Bill 45 by Senator Stern, and of course, Senate Bill 1500 by Assemblymember Garcia. These are obviously the water bond bills that we're tracking. I wanted to point out that Assembly Bill 1500 does have a hearing date tomorrow by the Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife. I've seen amendments, and I'm sure a lot of your agencies have seen amendments in proposed language. The bills have not been amended as of yet, but I would expect that tomorrow after the hearing, you get a better idea of where those amendments are and how those bills will be shaken up. And so we'll continue to track those. Wanted to point out that Senate Bill 223 and Senate Bill 222, both by Senator Dodd. The first, of course, related to the discontinuation of residential water service, and Senate Bill 222 was related to water rate assistance programs. I want to point out that those bills will be heard in committee on Monday. They both have been amended. I know that a lot of the water agencies, specifically the water retailers, do have concerns with both and are kind of tracking those. And so we'll keep a close eye on those, but you'll hear and learn more a little bit after Monday, April 12th. I'll throw this over to D-Zinc. There is a bill, Senate Bill 46 by, let me highlight this bill, Senate Bill 46 by Senator Stern. Obviously, we've all been tracking kind of the actions by the federal government, specifically related to the American Rescue Plan Act. We've all seen that there's roughly $26 billion available to California as a state, but then of course, trickles down through our counties. Senator Stern does have a bill that assists as far as the federal recovery funds and making sure those communities get those funds. So obviously we'll want to be tracking that to make sure that those funds are expedited and available to our communities. The bill that I was going to throw over to Dee, if she'd like to speak to it, is Senate Bill 480 by Senator Stern. And this bill is related to rules relating to inappropriate conduct by board members, officers, and staff of the Metropolitan Water District. So Dee, I don't know if you have any comments.
Yeah, thank you, EJ. And hello, President Williams and the members of the caucus. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Also because, oh, thank you. Also because I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that we have a little bit of a change in our agenda in terms of our approach on this bill. EJ's right. This bill was introduced, and as many of you know, we had a series of complaints that came to Metropolitan's board about workplace issues, and also some significant coverage by the Los Angeles Times. That has prompted some action by our board, first and foremost, to seek an independent review through our ethics office and contracting with the Shaw Law Group, which is underway. But it also attracted the attention of the legislature. And they have two different initiatives that they are discussing right now. The first is a potential audit by the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. And the second is this bill that was introduced by Senator Stern, SB 480. And in both regards, Metropolitan's position, and that we have been advocating informally, is that we want to cooperate fully and assist with these efforts to the extent that anything comes out of the recommendations or the review from the Shaw Law Group, and to the extent that it would require legislation, this potentially could be a vehicle to affect that. And we want to work with the author to do that. That said, let me talk a little bit about what the bill is. Specifically, the Stern bill would amend our act, the Metropolitan Act, and it's particular to this section of our act that identifies and creates the ethics office and the role of the ethics office in Metropolitan. It would add to the responsibilities of the ethics office, responsibilities related to inappropriate conduct. And the rules that the ethics office operates under for other ethics concerns would be basically transitioned to also incorporate any kind of activity that was complied with this definition of inappropriate conduct, which is basically EEO type issues. In doing so, we have reviewed this bill, this initial language for the bill anyway. And we looked at our current policies. So what we're proposing next week for the board is we're going to bring forward an information letter and give the board the background on the various policies that we have that address inappropriate conduct. Right now, inappropriate conduct, whether it's sexual harassment, any other kind of discrimination, all those issues, they are handled through our Human Resources Department. All EEO violations are if they relate to employees of the district. We do have a different policy related to board members of the district, and SB 480 would cover all of the entities, board members, officers, and employees of the district. We're going to walk through what this bill would do next week in terms of any kind of changes, but basically it's a very similar framework to the requirements for our ethics office right now, but expanding them to to address the responsibilities for EEO matters. As we do that, we originally thought we would bring forward a supportive amended position, which I believe was on the agenda. And we've decided that an information item is more appropriate at this point since we do not yet have the results of the Shaw Law Group review and because there is a potential for an audit down the road. So we're going to walk through what the bill means to the board next week. And our idea or the concept is that should recommendations come forward and be adopted by our board, that those would be potential amendments that we would ask for the author of the bill to consider down the road. And until then, we felt it was best to bring the item as an information item to the board. And Jeff, I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
No, that covers it, Dan. So we're just going to watch it at this time and track everything, and then we'll be working with the author's office after we get the results of our review and what changes we think are appropriate.
And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't hear any. Patrick?
No, it doesn't look like we have any questions. Did EJ, did you have anything further, or was that your concluded?
No, there was one other item, and just because we have Dee here, I thought I'd throw her another one. Assembly Bill 442 by Assemblymember Mays. This is related to Surface Mining and Reclamation Act of 1975 and an exemption for Metropolitan Water District for single master reclamation plans. And just as a FYI, I had a chance to talk with Kathy Viatella this morning on the Aqua Region 8. It seems like they're going to move forward with a favor position on this bill. This is, I think, kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, Dee, but has happened in the past, similar legislation to provide these exemptions. And of course, Kathy has offered to send us some information about it, so some of its member agencies could review it and possibly take a support position. But Dee, I didn't know if you had any specific comments.
Yeah, just to address this issue in general, we have been operating, obviously, the Colorado River Aqueduct since it was constructed in the early 1930s. And as a result of that, we have areas in our system where we are utilizing some of the material that is, some of the ground material that is in former borrow pits, gravel pits, things like that. This is determined according to the regulations as a mining activity, even though we're not mining, we're actually just maintaining our facilities. But it requires that we go through a regulatory process. And unfortunately, it differs from county to county. And we traverse more than one county in our facilities. So the idea behind this legislation was to have some consistency in how we're working under the same state law from one county to the other. And we worked with the counties to try to resolve any issues they might have. And that's basically the purpose behind the bill. And we're seeking to have consistency across our service areas so that we're not trying to comply with different rules in different counties.
Thank you very much. And President Williams,
yes.
That's all I had for my presentation, unless anybody has any specific questions.
Okay, any questions? Well, thank you very much, EJ. Once again, very good presentation. Okay, Patrick, is that it? I looked at it.
Sorry, President Williams. Yeah, that can. Thank you, Dee.
Nothing else on our agenda.
Yeah,
So,
brings us to our adjournment.
So there's nothing else here. So with that, I want to thank you all for coming today and participating. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, President Williams.